Good evening, folks. This is Deb and Dave, and this is the Factivist Report for Sunday, the 17th of December. And the subject is guns and the Second Amendment, and what the Second Amendment was never intended to be about, people. All you have to do is actually read it.
Before we go into, first off, I think we're going to take a week off for Christmas. So you guys have a wonderful, whatever holiday you celebrate, whether it be from Christmas to Hanukkah to Kwanzaa to Festivus, whatever you guys do, you just hang out in your house, whatever you do. I hope you guys have a good week, hang out with family, all of that. And you don't have to think about stuff like this. What the Republicans want, what the Heritage Foundation wants, what the right wing wants, basically is the ability to give your 3-year-old kid a JR-15 wrapped up in a giant bow for Christmas. That's what they want. And they want anybody to get a gun. They don't care. They don't care if if you had a felony record, whether it be nonviolent or violent in many cases. There's a case of this violent domestic abuser and someone who has fired guns in the middle of a street during a traffic dispute. There are lawyers fighting for his right to continue to carry. Understand where this goes. And this was never intended. The Second Amendment was written during a time in which we were just starting out, forming our country and trying to get away from the rule of England. It's a completely different situation now.
And if you read the actual verbiage of the Second Amendment, nowhere does it mention individuals owning guns. What it mentioned is a well-regulated militia.
Right. That only started with a recent case, which we'll dabble in for a second.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Deb. What were you
I really believe that the Supreme Court misinterpreted the Second Amendment, and I'm not the only one that thinks that way. There's actually Supreme Court justices who think that way as well.
So. And funny enough, some of the right-wing justices are starting to feel the pain of some of their old cases, and they're starting to be disgusted with themselves. And I have to say, good.
Yeah, me too.
You should be. There's getting a point to where there is a pain point for the right-wing Supreme Court justices. How far do you want to take gun rights?
Right.
Do you just want to make it the Wild Wild West again? Do you want to make it where, I don't know if people have watched the movie The Purge, where you're just able to shoot anybody?
I can't, I don't understand it. I don't understand America's fixation on it. When you talk to people, they'll tell you the reason they want it is because they have a right to it, because it's because of the Second Amendment. You can't even figure out why these people really even want a gun, other than someone said that they said you could have it. It's because it's my right as an American. Because God, one guy said, because God said I could have it. I said, God never even there weren't even guns when God was around. If there's a God, there weren't any guns. They were stoning people to death at that time. There were no firing squads. Okay.
Right. Watch The Life of Brian.
Yeah, exactly.
Where they stoned a guy for saying Jehovah.
Right.
There were no pistols there. Just saying. And we'll get into some of the gun defense numbers and all that. That's hotly contested, about how often a guy, like a gas station attendant or someone in a fast food joint actually protects themselves with a gun, chases a gunman away. Very, very rare, 1 to 2%. Okay. It's more than likely someone's going to commit suicide. Or, there's going to be a gun accident. No,
Anybody who's buying AR-15s, the number one selling gun in America, is because you can kill a large quantity of people at one time. That's the only reason to own an AR-15. That's the only reason.
And we'll get into this too, bump stocks. You can modify a gun to fire faster.
Right. Yep.
There's no need for that.
Right.
And there's a case where a guy's like, well, I should be able to do that because it's in the Second Amendment. No, that is not in the Second Amendment.
Right.
So let's get into this. Let's see here. I had it. There we go. And I will try to reduce my name mutilation, but it is my right via the First Amendment. I will try to not do that anymore. We have the name Jasmine Crockett embedded in our forehead at this point. So hold on 1 second. Jasmine Crockett is a House rep in Texas. So
And she is a hoot.
the Second Amendment reads, and this is from Britannica, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This is about a well-regulated militia. And by the way, we'll get into that
It would be the
for a
National
second.
Guard,
Right.
essentially.
These little militias that are running around, they're not well regulated.
No,
By the way.
neither are the American people, clearly.
Right.
So the crux of all of this is that this whole amendment was written, and what they wanted a well-regulated militia for was to make sure the federal government didn't overstep its bounds in matters of state issues. That's really what it was, that they wouldn't send in the military to take care of a problem that was happening in the states. So that's really what the Second Amendment was all about when it was written, to be honest with you.
Now, this is the only time I'm going to mention the Heritage Foundation, but I think it's apropos to mention them because they're just about guns for the sake of guns, to be completely honest with you. This is by Amy Swearer. I don't know how old she is. She looks like she's fresh out of college. I don't know if that's true or not. She's a senior legal fellow out of the Meese Center. That's their little center for producing talking heads.
Right, Edwin Meese. It's named after Edwin Meese.
Yes. So the gun violence epidemic, a public health crisis. Yes, it is. So what are we going to do about it? Violence, both with and without firearms, is a complex phenomenon that has no clear causal relationship to the rates of gun ownership or the relative strength of gun laws restricting or burning lawful possession. Now, I didn't really put that in there. The retort to that, but there is. When there was a an assault weapons ban, you saw the violence go down.
Yeah.
So the majority of gun deaths are suicide, which inherently raises broader concerns about mental health and also concerns about allowing these people to temporarily have guns. Anyone who has had to deal with suicidal thoughts themselves or from family members know that expediency, and I mean, if it's easier to access something to make it easy to commit suicide, those rates are going to go up.
Right.
So the easier it is to do it, Oh, make it
So I guess
difficult
with
for people.
Amy here, Amy thinks it's okay because, hey, it's suicide.
Right.
No one's
You're not hurting anybody else.
not killing other people. We're just letting people kill themselves because hell, they can have that their gun under the Second Amendment. You know?
Criminal gun violence is largely driven not by lawful gun owners, but by a small subset of repeat violent offenders, such as the man that they are trying to give gun rights back to
Right.
in a, in a case we're going to talk about. So bad that Amy Coney Barrett was embarrassed and disgusted.
That takes a
Public policy. Wait a minute. Yeah, public policies that fail to address this reality are significantly related to recent increases in violent crimes across the nation. So the problem is not gun control, but access to guns, really. I'm just saying. Despite the significant role mass public shootings play in national conversations on gun violence, they are by far one of the least common mechanisms of gun violence.
You know what?
And again, that doesn't matter.
It's that, you know what? So I guess, and it's we shouldn't worry about that fact that we're the only nation that has 580 some odd mass shootings a year because it's still a small percentage of the total number of shootings we have in America. So let's not try to worry about it. Let's not try to do anything about any of it.
Right.
Right.
Finally, lawful gun owners play a significant and often underappreciated role in furthering public safety. There is
Prove
no
it.
data to support that.
Prove that.
None. None.
They do nothing.
Only anecdotal evidence.
Right.
Okay.
But I forgot they don't have to prove anything. They're right wing.
So I just threw this in here as a rebuttal. How often are guns used for self-defense? 1 to 2%. Also from Time Magazine, this idea of a well-regulated militia and how they get that wrong. Um, and again, when the Constitution was written, it was a much different time. You're not talking about a newly forming country that has been oppressed by another country. So Republicans advised a famous ruling in Arkansas in 1842 did not vote for anarchy to suggest that in providing for a well-regulated militia, founders were condemning their descendants to cower under a reign of unregulated firepower was to train in absurdity. Basically, they're saying, listen, we have to give ourselves the power to organize and defend ourselves. It was a completely different situation.
Right.
You're not talking about guys walking around having to defend themselves in a supermarket.
Right.
Okay. So I have a couple of, if you remember, we talked about this. I believe it was actually in the last time we did a whole show on gun control. We talked about Heller, who wanted to carry an unregistered gun in D.C. and won. This is what started, and the Bruin decision started all of this.
Right.
So, Deb, do me a favor. I have to go for a second, but can you talk about Warren Burger?
Yeah.
I'll introduce it with this though. Warren Burger was not a progressive by
Right.
any stretch of the imagination. He was appointed as Nixon's choice for chief chief Supreme Court justice. So I'll let Deb go for a second. I have to take care of something.
Okay. So Warren Burger basically publicly stated that the interpretation by the Supreme Court that the Second Amendment was used for was interpreted as for individual citizens like me going out and buying a gun was one of the biggest hoaxes ever foisted upon the American people. I believe that that is paraphrasing exactly what he said, that the Second Amendment was never, ever about individual citizens owning guns, but a well-regulated militia. And it was only through, a poor interpretation of the way that constitutional amendment was the Constitution Second Amendment was written, interpreted, that gave individuals the notion that they had the right to own guns. And again, you see the effects that these decisions that are made for, because this was made for political purposes, by the way. Berger just as much as said that. There was a lot of pressure at the time that this ruling came down. There was a lot of pressure from the NRA and several other gun manufacturers and gun advocacy groups. So to say that Supreme Court justices can't be pressured and pushed into making political rulings as opposed to rulings based in the rule of law is a fallacy. It doesn't always have to be done properly. It gets done sometimes, as we saw with the ruling on Roe v. Wade. And right now, I'm going to put this on hold until Dave comes back. You're on.
So basically, I don't know what Deb said, but
Neither do I.
Warren Burger is not a quote unquote friend of the progressives. He actually pushed for the criminalization of sodomy.
Yeah, he's a conservative.
He was a way conservative guy.
Right.
But even he admitted that where this is being pushed was not the intention of the Second Amendment.
Well, he called the actual ruling one of the biggest hoaxes foisted upon the American people. That's one thing I'm sure of.
Right. He also talked about the overuse of Article 5.
Right.
But in terms of the Second Amendment, he said it does not give everyone the right to carry a gun. It was in terms of creating a well-regulated militia, which, by the way, as I said in the Times article, that term well-regulated militia, yeah.
He also
Where are those?
Yeah, he also indicated that, a lot of why that ruling came down was because at the time, gun advocacy groups and gun manufacturers like the NRA were pressuring for those kinds of rulings, and that the Supreme Court justices are not immune to that kind of pressure. They're not, no matter what anyone thinks.
So this is actually a statement through the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Justice Programs by Warren Burger. Second Amendment does not guarantee the right to own a gun. So just to go a little bit, former Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, Warren Burger argues that the sale, and this is back in the 90s, the sale, purchase, and use of guns should be regulated just as automobiles and boats are regulated, and such regulations would not violate the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution.
Correct.
The Second Amendment this is his abstract, by the way. The other abstract was by, I'm trying to remember, this is after the Heller case. That was Stevens, I believe.
I think you're right.
Yeah. But this is Berger. The Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution guarantees a right of the people to keep and bear arms. However, the meaning of this clause cannot be understood apart from the purpose, the setting, and the objectives of the original draftsman. At the time of the Bill of Rights, people were apprehensive about the new national government presented to them and helps explain the language and purpose of the Second Amendment. At the time, again, they were a new country and they had to protect themselves. They gave the people the right to protect themselves and the right to form a militia to protect their property against England. That's what this is about. Not the right to carry an AR-15, which, by the way, didn't exist, into a movie theater. So the Second Amendment guarantees a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state back in the late 1800s or 1800s or 18th century rather. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The need for a state militia was the predicate of the right guarantee so as to protect the security of the state.
Right, so that the federal government would not encroach on the state's freedoms. That's what
Yep.
it was.
Today, of course, the state militia serves a different purpose. A huge national defense establishment has assumed the role of the militia of 200 years ago. Americans have a right to defend their homes. Nothing should be right, nor does anyone question that the Constitution protects the rights of hunters to own and keep sporting guns for hunting any more than anyone would challenge the right to own and keep fishing rods and other equipment for fishing. Neither does anyone question the right of citizens to keep and own an automobile. If there is no strong interest by the citizenry in questioning the power of the state to regulate the purpose or the transfer of such a vehicle and the right to license the vehicle and the driver with reasonable standards. These are arguments that the left has been arguing for decades. We agree with Warren Berger on this, but now he would be considered a rhino at this point. It is even more desirable for the state to have reasonable regulations for the ownership and use of firearms in an effort to stop mindless homicidal carnage. Thank you, Warren Berger.
Of course, right now, what we have is not just mindless homicidal carnage, but people who want to overthrow the government who are weaponized, who have guns. And that's a very dangerous position for everybody in this country to be in.
So this story by The Intercept
this is the
was
one.
written, June of 2022. Right-wing Supreme Court continues its great fraud about the Second Amendment. So they're forcing mothers to have kids while at the same time, loosening gun laws. So there'll be more kids out there, but more targets, apparently. So the Supreme Court eliminated the constitutional right to an abortion and at the same time significantly expanded gun rights with its decision in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association Incorporated versus Bruin. So the same court that struck down Roe v. Wade voided an 111-year-old law, New York law, that required applicants for a concealed carry permit to demonstrate that they had a special, specific need for self-defense. Now, Florida, we talked about this on the short show. Florida has this: no license needed. They're the number 2 state in terms of gun violence. and mass shootings. So,
Number one is Texas, is that right?
I would think so, but I'm not completely sure. So this is the Bruin ruling about concealed carry and having to have your gun registered.
Yeah.
I, so why should there be any kind of gun control or gun registration or red flag laws or any of that? This is a gun violence archive. It updates gun violence incidents daily, and you can take a look. So this is as of probably yesterday. Um, so number of gun violence deaths, all causes, etc. 41,266. This is every town.
Yeah, they're good.
Yep. These are the I'm just, you know, the gun industry rakes in billions while our communities pay the price. $9 billion of gun sales. 40,000 people die in America. Wounds twice as many. And you don't really talk about the the people who are injured and how long it takes to recover from a gun wound sometimes. So here are some of the issues. Um, City gun violence, armed extremism. The one that struck me honestly was COVID because you're cooped up for freaking, a long period of time, or people are sick, and it messes with you. People, depression, people who already have mental health issues. Then you have gun violence by police, guns in public, hate crimes, impact of gun violence on marginalized communities. Let's talk about guns in public for 2 seconds. So carrying a gun in public is a tremendous responsibility. You don't get it just because you can. There should be a reason. Common sense public safety laws help keep guns out of places where they don't belong. Like, by the way, sports arenas, where Clarence Thomas told Kathy Hochul, be very selective where you who who thinks it's a good idea to carry a gun into Madison Square Garden?
Who thinks it's a good idea to carry a gun into a food store? I'm sorry, but you
Yeah,
know what? Get out of here. All right? Just because you can.
yeah. So this is Moms Demand Action, founded by Shannon Watts. Okay, she uh, she was affected. Okay, Sandy Hook took one of her children, and she organized this group. Okay,
And let me just say this, okay? Well, how many groups, like other groups, do we have advocating for gun legislation now? Just a
well,
lot,
we
right?
have, yeah, David
You can
Hogg's
demand,
group.
and when I just say it again, you can demand all you want,
Right.
but until you elect again a Democratic legislature, the GOP is unmoved by any of this, from what I can see. They're unmoved, okay? And whatever they do that might appear like Rick Scott's action after Parkland, whatever they do is for political expediency only. I believe they're unmoved by all of this.
And by the way, Rick Scott's legislation has been obliterated by Ron
DeSantis,
DeSantis.
right?
So just keep that in mind as well.
And by the way, when his legislation was obliterated by Ron DeSantis, he never spoke up and said, you should have left that in place either, Rick Scott.
He's more worried about creating Senate committees to find out why Florida State wasn't put in the college football playoffs.
Right. Yep. That's what I mean.
So here's the case that I was talking about: U.S. versus Rahimi. Supreme Court will, yes, ProPublica, I'm giving you your flowers. The Supreme Court will decide if domestic abuse orders can bar people from having guns. Okay, so let's talk about this guy for a minute, because I want you to understand who you're trying to protect. Da, 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 da. Okay, so this Supreme Court case involves a Texas man named Zaki Rahimi, who was issued a restraining order after his ex-girlfriend reported that he assaulted her and threatened to shoot her if she told anyone. According to police, he was then involved in five separate shooting incidents over a 2-month period, including shooting a gun into the air during a traffic dispute. Police found 2 guns during the search of his home. He was indicted for violating the federal prohibition on gun possession for those under protection orders. Rahimi moved to dismiss the indictment, but the district judge ruled against him. Rahimi then pleaded guilty. Guess which court overturned? The Fifth Circuit originally affirmed this district court decision, but then, after the Supreme Court ruling last year, the gun laws should be reviewed against the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. The Fifth Circuit, of course, issued a new opinion, this time agreeing with Rahimi that the firearms ban violated the Second Amendment and domestic abusers shouldn't be singled out as a group.
Unbelievable. Fucking unbelievable. Unbelievable. Let's make sure we protect those domestic abusers, okay? Let's make sure. Because we can throw fucking women under the bus, but let's make sure we protect their domestic abusers.
So here we go with the slippery slope argument, okay? Fifth Circuit Court, Corey Wilson. Could speeders be stripped of their right to keep and bear arms? We're not talking about speeders. Political nonconformists, we're not talking about them either. People who don't recycle or drive an electric vehicle.
Oh, stop it.
Stop with the slippery slope nonsense.
Stop it. Just stop it. This is such bullshit.
Right. Research has shown that domestic abusers are a politically dangerous group of people, and they are even more so with guns. One study by the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund found that domestic dispute calls are the most dangerous circumstance for police to respond to, leading to more officer deaths than any other type of call. In addition, more than 2/3 of mass shootings involve domestic violence or committed by someone with a history of it. And this guy is off the chain. Okay. So here, so this is more about the Rahimi case. The Supreme Court's big gun case was humiliating for the justices. Amy Coney Barrett is just like wincing at all of this because it's showing who they are protecting. A man willing to brandish a gun and solve his problems by shooting a gun off. This is not what the Second Amendment was written for.
Right.
Biden administration asks the U.S. Supreme Court uphold ban on felons owning guns. Now, there's an argument about nonviolent felons going back into the public, and should they be allowed to own guns? There was a case, I believe this person was allowed to own a gun again, but there's a difference between that and a guy like Zaki Rahimi.
Right.
Okay, each case is different. You're convicted of felony tax fraud. That's different than shooting a gun at somebody.
Right.
It's the other case. U.S. Supreme Court to decide legality of federal ban on gun bump stocks. There is one purpose for a bump stock: to increase the firing capacity or the firing capability of a gun, essentially making it,
A semi-automatic weapon.
yeah, a more powerful, more dangerous, and by the way, illegal weapon,
Right.
making it an automatic or like bumping it up to make it closer to an automatic weapon. So the argument here is, well, he has a right to carry it. Why? Why? You're upgrading these guns to something that's already illegal. What's the point? What's the purpose of it? To kill as many people as possible.
That's exactly why they exist.
Yep. I just wanted to mention a couple of people in this too. Gabby Giffords. Remember her? Now she was originally a Republican, but then after 2000 with the Department of Homeland Security and all that, she got sick and tired of that, and she became a Democrat. 2011, she was shot in the head during a rally, and then she survived, and she created her gun control advocacy group called Giffords.org. So hold on, it's so there we go. Okay. Her husband is also in office, I believe. Is he still in office?
Oh, he is. Yep. He won in
Yeah.
he's definitely.
Now, okay, I believe we know that Democrats in Arizona are a little different, even back then. But it's beside the point. Okay. Gun violence affects everybody, politicians, everybody. Um, I don't know in terms of what percentage of people have been affected by gun violence. I was. My stepfather committed suicide with a gun. I also have known a couple of people who have died from gun accidents or gun suicide. I actually went to Virginia Tech. I knew couple of people who knew of the gunman in Virginia Tech, Cho. I also know some of the things that went around that, and that a lot of people feel that the college did not do the right thing. But these cases are coming up more and more, right? Gun lobbies campaign of fear and division put gun manufacturer profits over public safety. We have them on the defensive. We're not letting up. Good.
And by the
Good.
way, um, while Americans do support the right to own guns, the overwhelming majority of Americans want gun legislation that makes it safer for people to own guns. Okay, makes it safer for people in the public to engage with people who own guns, whatever way you want to look at it. I don't see how, honestly, anybody can argue that a criminal background check or a mental health consideration, a check on that, it should be a problem with the Second Amendment. It's like, you know, regulating driving an automobile. I don't understand how people can't see we can consider an automobile a weapon of mass destruction, but not a gun. A gun is a lethal weapon. We absolutely have to regulate it. There's no two ways about it. In a country full of 337 million people, it just has to be.
It's amazing because a vehicle, a car or a truck or whatever, its primary purpose is to transport you from one place to another.
Right.
But if used improperly, it can hurt, maim, kill people.
Right.
So you have licenses and things you have to get in order
You
to.
have to prove that you can safely drive a vehicle. Why shouldn't you have to prove that you can safely fire a gun? It's ridiculous. In a sporting, there was a story a few years ago about these two idiots out in somewhere in the Midwest that were playing with an AR-15 and they were shooting bullets into the ground. The only problem was it was the dead of winter and the ground was frozen. The bullets were bouncing off the ground and going into people's houses. Okay? Use your head. I mean, people need to understand this.
So there is legislation being proposed by the Democrats. We know that this legislation will go nowhere right now because of the majority in the House that the Republicans have. But this is Senator Warren and Representative Hank Johnson, Democrat of Georgia, and it reintroduced the Gun Violence Prevention and Community Safety Act. Okay, here are just a couple of bullet points on it. Creating a federal gun licensing system, requiring universal background checks, keeping guns out of the wrong hands by red flag laws, background checks, that kind of thing, ensuring the guns are used and stored properly, banning military style assault weapons, and anything that can convert those weapons into those things, like bump stocks. Okay. Crack down on gun trafficking, improve oversight of gun dealers, hold the gun industry accountable, invest in research and community-based gun violence prevention. All of that. Now, I know the Washington Examiner is basically right-wing toilet paper.
It is.
But what they're saying is that this gun legislation would demolish the Second Amendment.
That's bullshit. Okay? It's bullshit. This is the same newspaper that is writing right to the right of this article that wokeness wrecked Disney. So
right.
Know what rag you're reading.
Right. The last thing I wanted to mention is Governor Newsom is basically everything that Elizabeth Warren is talking about and Hank Johnson is talking about. He's talking about putting into the 28th Amendment to clarify gun rights in America, to go back to sanity, to go back at least to what Warren Burger was talking about, that yes, you have a right to defend your home and your property, but you don't have a right to just go around brandishing a gun in public, concealed carry for no reason, leading to potential issues like with Mr. Rahimi there. Okay. So here we go. Raising the federal minimum age to purchase a firearm from 18 to 21, which means nothing, by the way, if you do not enforce those laws.
Right.
Okay. Kyle Rittenhouse should never have had a gun in the first place. The guy who bought the gun for him was convicted. Kyle Rittenhouse is walking around, acting like a hero.
He's walking around being groomed for a political life now.
Appointment, yeah.
Yeah. No, not appointment.
Mandating,
They're pushing him as a contender to legislative positions at some point in the future. In other
God help
words,
us.
yeah, yeah.
Mandating universal background checks to prevent truly dangerous people from purchasing a gun. Which, by the way, the Rahimi case, everybody believes that the judges will vote on the side of sanity and say that no, this person cannot carry a gun. Okay. But the point being, it should have never gotten this far.
Right.
Instituting a reasonable waiting period for all gun purchases, which allow gun stores or whoever to do a criminal background check, mental health background check, see if this person was ever, subject to red flag laws, if he's okay, she's okay, barring civilian purchase of assault weapons that serve no other purpose than to kill as many people as possible in a short amount of time.
Correct.
Weapons of war our nation's founders never foresaw, including but not limited to bump stocks.
Right.
Okay. So we are not saying that people don't have a quote unquote right to defend themselves or have a gun, at least in their own home. But these things, they have to have some kind of limits to them.
And they have to have some kind of
And
regulation.
and that Heritage Foundation person saying that, well, we already have laws in place to keep people from killing each other. How are those working? And those are already being challenged in the Supreme Court.
Right.
Registration laws, age requirements, all of it
You know,
constantly being
if you
whether
if
or not,
you
yeah,
if you are a law-abiding citizen owning a gun, you should have no problem registering your gun. You should have absolutely no problem registering a gun unless you're planning on committing a crime with that gun, or unless you're planning to go out and murder a bunch of people with that gun. You should have no problem registering a gun like you have no problem registering your car. Okay? It's the same goddamn thing.
I
It doesn't,
know,
it doesn't affect anybody's rights. It doesn't affect your rights to own a gun by you registering a gun.
right. I know I've had stories here. I don't have it on the screen this time, but people in the military saying saying that, hey, we know the responsibility of carrying, storing, firing a gun. And we agree that there needs to be sane gun control legislation.
Yep.
This is insane that people are like these, and I'm not pulsing them. I don't want to make this sensational. House reps with their kids. We've shown those pictures before. Christmas cards with the kids with
Yeah, there's some more out
15s
there right
with
now.
rifles. Yeah,
There's some out there right now. It's Christmas time. It's time to make merry. Show everybody your gun.
so be responsible. That's all we're asking. And I know it's asking too much. I already know, but we're still going to ask it.
And
You guys have a great holiday. Don't explode a turducken in your freaking gas-fired, you know, your
whatever you want.
gas-fired barbecue grill. Don't shoot each other with cap guns, whatever. Just have fun, be with your family, have good music, do whatever you do. If you're an adult, drop your gummies, hang out, listen to some good music, do whatever you're going to do. But you do not have a right to affect the lives of other people by running around firing a gun. I guarantee you, if you take a look at the gun violence archive around the holidays, there are going to be several, especially around New Year's,
Right.
there are going to be several mass shootings because of people being stupid.
I'll be honest with you. One of the reasons why I love New Orleans. One of the
Right.
reasons why I have absolutely, I had a couple of people ask me, let's get out for Mardi Gras. Hell no. They're out in the middle of the street and huge crowds of hundreds of thousands of people shooting guns in the air. No, no, thank you. I'm not going there. I'll go the week after Mardi Gras. That's when I'll go, you know?
So
And it's
I
not
just thought of
malicious,
this.
it's just dangerous, you know?
Right. Years ago, okay, I'm going to tell a personal story. What the hell? Years ago, there was a gentleman, apparently he was in security or whatever, brought the gun to the to the whatever the parking lot of our facility. Got a little bit of hot water. He started flashing his badge. Oh, I'm in security. First off, you're not supposed to do that. But second off, you're not supposed to bring a gun onto federal grounds. Okay, what is the purpose? I get it if you're in security and you don't have time to drop it off, but imagine this, okay? Just in recent times, my facility on Long Island, I work in a postal processing plant, mail processing plant. We had up to 50 cases of COVID. We have wooden pallets right now that break apart and have nails sticking out of them. I want the possibility of somebody who's probably already angry carrying a pistol around. I got to worry about COVID. I got to worry about people coughing on me. I got to worry about stepping on a nail. And I got to worry about that. People, come on. Give me a break already.
It's ridiculous. It is. It is.
And you have to worry about, in the supermarket, some idiot whose belt is too loose, his gun in a holster falls off and the gun goes off. I know that
I was
happened with, well,
I was in Virginia and the guy in front of me had a gun in his back pocket of his jeans. Okay, he didn't even have it in a holster. All right, I could see
right.
it right in his back pocket.
It's
You
like,
bet your life I got out of there mighty quick.
right.
So
So,
we got. We don't know what we're going to start the year off with. As soon as we know, we'll let you know. But we're off next week. So
right. And listen, we're going to probably give you uh, gifts of sane candidates, maybe. I think that might be an idea. I do know, there's
no,
candidates coming up
I
all the
think
time.
what we should do. I think what we should do actually is. I know you probably haven't seen it because you don't subscribe, but I do. The Bulwark did volumes 1 and volumes 2 of deplorables of the deplorables of
Oh, we could do that too. Yeah,
we could
yeah.
we could use their material and just have a look at what they came up with. That was pretty good what I saw. So
The ghost of Christmas past and hopefully the ghost of Christmas future
right.
and the ghost of Christmas present.
So maybe that's what we'll do. We'll take next week off and then we'll come back and we'll do that before we get serious
Some
about
of the some of the gems of our political discourse. Jesus
this.
Christ.
Yep. Yep.
Yep. All right.
We'll see you guys later.
Have a great holiday, you guys.